Suzanne DeLorenzo is the Water Quality Manager at Clackamas River Water. Suzanne is the kind of person who is always looking for the next challenge ahead.
I don't really like to sit still, so I like to always be moving forward and learning new things.
When Suzanne first began working for Clackamas River Water, her focus was to know what the job was all about.
I observed how things were going, what we did in our lab. I met people in the community and partners and found out what they were doing, and I started building relationships and thinking, a lot of thinking.
That thinking led Suzanne to a project that she had started to develop during her undergrad work.
What I proposed was tying in some of the work that I did back on the East Coast in my undergrad and post-undergrad with out here and really running a microbial source tracking project. So microbial source tracking is when you go out into the environment and you look for sources of fecal contamination in the river and try and identify where they're coming from.
Through extensive research, Suzanne learned that her lab could use molecular techniques to monitor for potential pathogens in the water.
In 319 grant, pitched the idea of getting what's called a quantitative PCR machine, which will help us look at the DNA that are in environmental samples. I got interns from the Water Environment Technology program at Clackamas Community College and started training them on the technique. We ran this big watershed project. We called it a pilot, which is code for this might not work. And it did work, actually. So cyanobacteria for a drinking water provider, it kind of was on the forefront of our mind after what happened in Salem a few years ago, began getting regulated by OHA. And so that was something in our watershed that we had identified in the past. We had been tracking it using a whole bunch of different techniques. And we decided it was time to really enhance that and get a leg up on it.
Suzanne's ability to identify a problem and determine what tools are needed to address the problem gave Clackamas River Water a head start in dealing with the issue of monitoring cyanotoxins.
One of the things I think is really important is taking scientific techniques and really bringing them into a practical, useful application. So here you have this outside concept of quantitative PCR. Whoa. All it does is it takes a little snippet of DNA, amplifies it, and it counts it. And it lets you know relatively how much you have in a system. So combining that with OHA's new regulations, which required us to test for cyanotoxins, I thought, well, if we got quantitative PCR machine, and we developed the ability to detect toxins, and we combined it with some of the work we were already doing using a flow cam, which is basically if you take a microscope and a cell counter and a camera and threw it all together so you can look at what's in your water. If we combine all of these things, we could actually develop a program that is more adaptive and preventative than reactive.
Suzanne's networking ability and willingness to share information with other water providers is clearly beneficial, not only to the Clackamas River Water District, but also to districts across the state of Oregon.
Some of the idea of networking and communication comes a lot out of grad school, right? You have a problem, you're stuck on it, and you could spend hours trying to figure it out, or you can just go call your buddy or walk down the hall and say, hey, how are you doing with this? And so we got our ELISA machine in-house, so that was the primary machine that was needed to measure cyanotoxins. It's not a difficult protocol, but it was the first time that anyone in the state really was trying to tackle a certification for cyanotoxins. My goal is really to create a network of support because this is kind of new territory that we're walking into, and we should all be walking into that together.
When asked how other districts could begin to realize the same kind of accomplishments that Clackamas River Water has, Suzanne's answer is what you might expect.
Pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone and start talking. We all have the same goal, and we can move forward a lot faster if we're talking and working together than if we're working in our little silos. So it's exciting to see that evolving.